All right, all right. Well, we are about to get started. Our very first session at OZY Fest 2018. Folks, I am super excited to welcome 14-time All-Star, 3-time MVP, and fantastic businessman and entrepreneur, Alex Rodriguez. Guys, big hand for Alex Rodriguez.
Hello, New York.
Alex, what feels like home to you? Is New York home? Is Miami home? What's home these days?
I feel like New York is home. I was born right down the street in Washington Heights, and then raised in Miami. Yeah. But obviously New York, playing here for almost 15 years, winning the World Championship in 2009, and still being involved with the Yankees and advisor to Hal Steinbrenner. New York.
And what about Miami? How did the family get to Miami in the first place?
Yeah, so I was born here, and my parents thought kind of in the late 70s, things were getting a little bit rough here. So they decided to move down south. My mom really wanted me to be in a school with a lot of background and be able to play baseball and do all those kind of things. So I was very grateful to be able to go to a climate like South Florida where I can actually interact and kind of develop my skills. And to be able to play sports 12 months out of the year was a big advantage for me.
And how good were you early? Because one of the stories that I thought I heard is that you had an interesting experience starting out high school, that not everybody was convinced that you were a future 3-time MVP.
You know, Carlos, I grew up in the 80s, and the 80s was all about Magic Johnson and Larry Bird basketball. And I would sit around, watching CBS on Sundays and the classic matchups between the Lakers and the Celtics. And then I would go outside and shoot hoops all day, to the point where I ended up quitting baseball. And I quit it for about 6 months when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And my mother calls a meeting with me. And, my mother, I come from very, very modest beginnings. And my mother had 2 jobs. She was a secretary in the morning, and she served tables at night at a restaurant called Latin America down in Miami.
Oh, my goodness. I used to eat at Latin America, the beefsteak and panizado.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, good beefsteak.
Okay.
And she said, I want a meeting with you. Well, if my mom, she called one meeting like in 9 years. Like, she doesn't have meetings. So this meeting, I said, there's something that's very, very important. Interestingly enough, she had 2 rosters. And I go, almost like a lawyer. She looked like Carlos. And she said, I want you to, and then she gave me a yellow highlighter. Here's a yellow highlighter. Here's the NBA roster. She goes, tell me how many Dominican players in the NBA. I looked at this thing for 20 minutes. I didn't pick up one. Then, like a good lawyer, she gives me the Major League Baseball roster. She goes, highlight in green, how many Dominican players? By the time I got to like 50, I said, okay, Mom, I'll go back to playing baseball.
Now, baseball wasn't the only thing, though, because you also, rumor has it, played a little football.
A little bit, quarterback. I played quarterback in high school. Being in Miami, I wore number 13 for Dan Marino. He was my favorite player. And it was football and baseball. One of the things about young kids today that just drives me crazy, they're so specific so early. Like, you don't need to have the rest of your life planned at 7. I have a 13-year-old girl and a 10-year-old daughter. And I want them to do everything and be diversified in their set of skills. And what's interesting enough, Carlos, is the skills, the attributes that I learned playing football as a quarterback and basketball as a point guard helped me more in baseball than anything else, because it gave me the ability to be well-rounded and pull from different, assets.
What's it like we all hear about it, and we hear about lots of people who come from modest circumstances and then become really successful, whether it's in sports or business or entertainment, et cetera. But literally, when you have a mother who's working 2 jobs, you don't have a ton of money, and then overnight, you become the #1 pick in the Major League Baseball draft, and at 18, you all of a sudden have a lot of money. What's that moment like? Is it a moment filled with excitement? Were you nervous? Did you not know where to turn? Like, literally, what is that like, not only for you, but for your mom?
I think all of it, a little bit of everything. I'm Dominican, I have a big family, and there's a tribal mentality that if one makes it, we make it for all. And to a degree, that's very true. But one of the things that I was most focused on is making sure that my mother never worked again. And the minute that I signed my contract at 17, I bought her a house and I bought her a car. And since that day, she's never worked again.
And when you were adjusting, yeah, big hand for Mom. What was the hardest thing? Because for all the success that you have, we hear about a lot of people who, at a young age, get drafted into professional sports and then don't end up making it. Those folks who you've met along the way who've made it versus those folks who didn't make it, is there a difference? Are there 2 or 3 things that tend to separate those who cross all the way over?
Yeah, and it's not talent. You know, it's not talent, right? You would think that they're just the most talented make it all the time. And it's really characteristics with whether it's, you know, grit, whether it's, you know, I always say I want people on my team to have a PhD. And I don't mean from, you know, a big school. I mean poor, hungry, and driven. And what I find is people that are driven and that have focus and that have the ability to focus. The characteristics of focus and communication today are more important than ever before because, you know, they say distractions, I call them attractions. Because they're taking us away every day from what we're supposed to do. And when you find great people, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or Michael Jordan, what they can do better than anyone is laser focus. You know, I always say that amateurs go wide and shallow, professionals go narrow and deep, and that's what you should do.
Talk to me about business and how you decided to jump into business and what drew you to that. Was it the kind of thing where 10 years into the league you realized I'm not going to be able to play baseball forever, or was there something else that drew you into business?
Well, I think I've always had an entrepreneur spirit. Even when I was a little kid trading baseball cards, I was the best at trading baseball cards because I felt like I knew value more than my buddies. Since I watched baseball all day long, I would always get the best trades, you know. They would trade me like a scrub for like Darryl Strawberry. I was like, oh, that's a great trade. I would get 2 scrubs. I would give them 2 scrubs and give me Don Mattingly. I'm like, all right, let's do business again. It was fun, but you know, when I was about 10 years old, I always had a dream to be a Major League Baseball player and a business person. And then, Carlos, I think growing up, we never owned anything. We always had to rent homes. And my mother, we had to move every 18 months because the landlord kept raising the rents. And I remember as a 11 or 12-year-old going down to my knees and praying, and I said, boy, if I can ever trade places with the landlord, I would do that. And the first time I had a few bucks in my early 20s, I had an opportunity to buy a duplex. And I needed about $48,000 in my down payment. Excuse me. And I bought the duplex, and I was very nervous. And then a couple of years later, I sold it for double. And I said, man, this is a pretty good business. And little by little, I started growing my portfolio. And we've grown that to about 14,000 units in about 14 cities all over the Southeast. And the point of that story, it started small. Everything starts small.
How hands-on are you? Because one of the things that surprised me in getting to know you a little bit this week is how specific you are about things and how well briefed. Have you always been a very hands-on person? Is this something new post-baseball?
I've always been hands-on, and I think, and I have been with my career, or I just think less is more. And, you know, rather than buying 3 average things, maybe just buy 1. You know, whether you get into art, a great art collection is just 1 great piece. And I think sometimes people equate more with more, and it's not. And I think it's building a great team and being highly connected. Connection is everything. You want people to be able to get a hold of you, especially when things are not going right. I always tell my team, lead with bad news. I can always handle the good news, but always let's deal with and be proactive about getting in front of things.
And say more about how you deal with bad news. Are you someone where that tends to rock you and then you recover quickly? How do you deal with bad news?
Well, I've built a lot of tolerance over the years. You know, I think when you're a leader in any sector of life, I think one thing is constant. You're going to have to deal with turbulence. And I always say about pilots, you know, I mean, all pilots are great when it's 75 and sunny, but you want that great pilot when it's a thunderstorm and there's lightning. That's when you really get to earn your money. I think the same is true for CEOs and leaders.
Take me back to the baseball diamond a little bit, because you were having early success with a couple of teams, and then all of a sudden you come to the Yankees. Is it really that big a transition, given that you had been a successful ball player? You'd already signed one of the three biggest contracts in baseball history at that point. Coming to New York, is it really that big a step up as they say, or was it you were already a pro, you were good at this, and you were ready to handle the Yankees limelight?
I don't think there's anything that can prepare you for playing in New York and wearing pinstripes. It is one of the most exciting, most challenging, greatest honor of my life to still be involved with the pinstripes, and to think about the responsibility that this is the same uniform that Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio wore. It's exceptional. Look, I played 7 years with the Mariners. I played 3 in Texas, and then I've been with the Yankees now for about 15 years, and it is night and day being anywhere else or being part of the Yankee organization.
And how so? Because I hear people say that, but literally, what is the difference? What was different there versus when you were a Ranger down in Texas?
Yes, it's funny. I was talking to Giancarlo Stanton, our DH right fielder, and he was just in Miami last year. And he said, boy, I will go in my shorts, my flip-flops. We had 1 or 2 beat reporters, and it was a game, and it felt really good, you know. But here, you come to the Bronx, is an event. Is sold out. You're on national TV every day. It's just different. And then it's the pressure cooker. You know, we were talking just this week, and I think whether you're Joe Torre, Girardi, or Mariano Rivera, or Andy Pettitte, when you work for the Yankees, you're stewards of the game, and really you, the fans, are the shareholders. So it very much is like running a public company or being an executive in a public company. There is zero margin for error, and we have to answer the call, not just to our manager or to the Steinbrenner family, but it's to you every day, the common folks that's out there earning your living, paying our paycheck every single day. And as a player, I felt incredible pressure and responsibility to be able to give you, the fans, your ROI, your return on your investment, both from a sentimental point of view, emotional point of view, and your actual capital you're going out and investing into us.
And talk to me a little bit about being in a place where there are lots of superstars in New York, and even in particular, as you said, Steinbrenner family, Joe Torre, Joe Girardi, all sorts of interesting people there, Derek Jeter. What was it like for you all of a sudden being the superstar, but also knowing that there were other stars there as well? Were you able to handle that easily? Did it take you a couple of years before?
Not easy at all. And, you know, I wish I knew, Carlos, what I know now post my suspension versus pre. And what I realized is that you can't do anything by yourself. You need great people around you. And you don't need to win every argument, every debate. You have to pick your battles. And, you know, I always say a great team is, I call it the 80-20 syndrome. Is great teams, you have people that do 80% of the work that want 20% of the credit. And when you have losing organizations, you have people that do 20% of the work but want 80% of the credit. And I think, you know, in those cases, less is more.
Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Warren Buffett. How did you meet Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor of all time? How did you end up meeting him?
So Warren is a great mentor of mine. Interesting enough, we've been in business now for about 18 years together. When I first signed my contract with the Texas Rangers, it was a large contract, and they needed to be able to insure that contract. And bottom line is, the last third of that contract wasn't insurable. And I guess my owner at the time, Tom Hicks, with the Rangers, says, when you need extra capital, you call Warren Buffett, you call Omaha. So he called Warren and he said, hey, Warren, I have a problem. I'm assigning Alex for a 10-year contract. Would you consider the last third of it, which is the most expensive part, obviously, on a 10-year deal? The last 3 are the most expensive from an insurance point of view. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, I will insure it if you send $4 million to my bank account tomorrow by noon, I will insure Alex. So sure enough, a little bit before noon, he sends the $4 million. Warren Buffett ends up insuring my contract for 10 years, and then he re-upped when I signed with the Yankees again. So when I heard that story, I said, wow, I'm in business with Warren Buffett. He's betting on me. So I called to Omaha and never thought I would get a call back and answer my email back. And within a few hours, I got an email back. He invited me down to Omaha. And that started a series of me going down to Omaha for about 4 or 5 years in a row. And we were just down there last week with Jennifer. I took her down for the 87th birthday. And yeah, he's been a great friend and a great mentor.
And so what have you learned from Warren Buffett that surprised you? Because even before getting to know someone like Warren Buffett, you meet lots of interesting and impressive people, meet lots of business people. Anything interesting and different that you've learned from Warren that you hadn't heard elsewhere?
I think what I've learned from Warren the most is learning by example. I mean, he's been in the same house over 50 years. He drove me to the airport himself in his Cadillac. There is no BS. There's no fanciness. He drives to work every day because he actually loves it. He told me he feels like he's never worked a day in his life. And I just think the idea of keeping things very, very simple. You know, while he's worth, billions and billions of dollars, he's had the same office with about 15 or 18 people, and he's running, Berkshire Hathaway, which is a conglomerate, right? Probably one of the greatest companies ever built in American history. So that's what I learned from him. And the other thing I learned from him is you're better off paying a fair price for a great business than paying a great price for a fair business. So in a nutshell is always buy the best and forget the rest.
Love that. Love that. Few more questions, and I'm going to come to the audience for 2 or 3 questions as well. Alex, talk to me. I know you spend a lot of time in business in different ways, but I also know you and I talked about the number of pro athletes who end up going broke, who end up being bankrupt afterwards. Why do you think that is? Why do so many guys now, because they've seen other guys now, it's not like we don't know the story, it's not like we haven't seen lots of other people end up on hard times. Why are guys still going broke? Why is there not some kind of intervention?
So just by a show of hands, how many people have a college degree? How many people have a master's? How many people have a PhD? Boy, I'm going to exit stage right here in a minute. You guys should be talking to us. What I've learned is I saw some interesting data points. And the data points were, unlike anybody here today, about 90% of athletes' income for their lifetime is made from age 20 to 30. So then you wonder what happens from 31 to 80. That's one. Two, the average career of a Major League Baseball player is 5.5 years. And there's 750 players, less than 5% have a college degree. So I'm not a stockbroker, but with that information alone, I was short that stock. And that's why players are going bankrupt to as high as 70% in the NFL, right? And then the other thing is, I'm going to keep it really simple. People say, Carlos, how did this guy made $100 million? How did he go broke? Well, I'll run you through a little exercise. $100 million is a lot of money. If you live in New York or you live in LA, you're down to at least 50. You pay your manager 10%. You pay your agent 5%. You haven't bought a house. You haven't bought a car. And you still haven't even been divorced for the first time yet. So it happens.
Who within, if you were to try and change that, how would you go about trying to change that? Because for one of the most heartbreaking things about it is not only the individual story, but a lot of times these are a lot of black and brown players who communities and families are counting on. And when they end up going broke, it's not just a personal story, but sometimes it's a family story, it's a community story, it's a missed opportunity. How would you change that if you could?
Yeah, well, first of all, education. The fact that we don't teach financial literacy in junior high and high school, it's really, really sad, okay? We take so many bogus classes that do not help us one bit, but yet I have people that I played with that do not know how to balance their checkbook. I have people that I played with that do not know how to write a check. And I've written many, many checks for a lot of people that I played with, and it's extraordinarily sad, right? But I think we've done a lot of chatter. But the fact is, in 1994, when I entered the league, it was a $1 billion industry. Cut to today is $10 billion. But the same numbers, they're not getting better, they're getting worse. So we're spending more, not understanding the ramifications of 53% tax out in California or near 50 here in New York, right? So financial literacy is something that we have to attack with the next generation aggressively. And instead of talking about it, I think you can build what is called, I call it the oh shit fund, right? Where if Carlos, if you come out of Stanford and you're going out and you're playing for the New York Yankees and you make $50 million, which is great, but it has to last you, for 100 years, is every paycheck you get, you touch Uncle Sam and you touch your fund, right? So direct deposit. Every time you get something, 10% of your income, if you're making 10%. If you're making $1 million, 10%. And you do this for as long as you play, but you have to sign the contract that you cannot touch this money until Carlos is 45. And we're simply looking at metrics and making a bet that Carlos is going to make better bets at 45 than at 25. And if we just do that alone, we can go from 70% and cut that in half.
Alex, I'm going to switch topics on you a little bit. Colin Kaepernick really galvanized the whole country in many ways in a big conversation. Some agree, some disagree, some partially agree and disagree. But part of what he did was once again put athletes front and center on cultural issues, on political issues. We certainly saw that in the 60s with Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and others. How important do you think that is for athletes who often have among the biggest stages, people pay attention, care about what you say? How important is that, you think, that athletes wade into political issues and cultural topics?
That's always been a very sensitive issue for a lot of people. Everybody has their choice to use their platform in whatever way they want to use it, whether that's social media or whether that's, every day when you're a quarterback, you stand there and you can actually speak to millions and millions of Americans, right? And I choose to take a different approach, but I'm not in a position to judge him or anybody. I do think that collectively we can do great things for what's right. And whatever you think those issues are, then you should really get out there. I mean, for me, I come from a single woman. I always say that the last 100 years were all about men, and the next 100 years is all about women and women equality, right? And I think my company's ran by women. My CFOs are women. My managing directors are women. My chief of staff's a woman. And they're not hired because they're women. They're hired because they're the best people for the job.
Speaking of women, you're dating a wonderful woman right now. Anybody here ever hear of Jennifer?
First of all, Jennifer loves Carlos. I'll tell you a quick story. When we met, Carlos started talking. He's this really handsome guy with a great smile, with a Harvard law degree. Jennifer's like, oh my God, you remind me of Obama the way you speak.
That's why I like her. She's good people. She's got good taste.
And I said, Jennifer, Carlos is taken. He's taken.
Happily taken.
Happily taken.
But talk to me about what you've learned about love, because I know you talk about your mom a lot. I know you care about your little girls, and you think a lot about relationships, whether it's in business, personal, etc. What have you learned about love over the years?
Well, people always talk about IQ and EQ, and I think those are so paramount to young entrepreneurs and people you bring into your team. But I was telling Carlos, I think for me, the most important one, or one of the most important ones, is LQ, and that's love. Because everything we do should start with love. And when you plant the seeds, and if it starts with love, then you're going to have a much better opportunity for it to blossom into something you really care about. And Jennifer is one of the most incredible people in the world. Not is she beautiful from outside, but she's also beautiful inside. And born right here in the Bronx, wears that sleeve everywhere she travels around the world. It's a great mother, is a great daughter, friend, a great partner to me. And I've learned more from her in a short time than I have from any other human being I've ever been. And obviously you've been around her now, and you know how special she is and her energy is. Yeah,
it's a wonderful person. Guys, we're going to take a couple of questions. I see a question right up here. We're going to try to take 2 or 3 questions, and I'm going to come right here.
you? Are you guys busy?
I'm going to repeat the question, Alex, just so everyone can hear. So the question was, when you face a scandal, when you face a suspension like Alex did, what's the mindset in terms of coming back and not getting worn down? Alex, how did you encounter it? How did you deal with it? Were you broken at first, or?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was, and thank you for that question. You know, the interesting thing about being down and out is it gives you an opportunity to take full accountability. You know, my road back did not start. First of all, I screwed up in a big way, okay? Secondly, I doubled down and acted like an idiot, okay? And then what ended up happening was I said, I'm lying to myself. I'm lying to people, and it's not who I am. And I felt I needed to get more out of myself than that. I expected more. So I finally looked in the mirror and said, there's no one to blame but you. And I need to apologize to people. And I started doing that. And not knowing where this thing would end, I knew that my goal, because I was way underground, I was in ground zero minus 500 levels, is that I wanted to come out and be a respectable son to my mother and a respectable father to my daughters. Never thinking I would be on TV, never be thinking that I would be here talking to you. So accountability, and is interestingly, in the middle of my suspension, which was, for you guys and women that don't know, I served the longest suspension in Major League history for PED use. And while I wanted that suspension to be 50 games and prayed about it, it was 162. But it ended up being the biggest blessing in disguise, because, you know, some people need to kind of rehab the house and paint the walls and fix the windows. I needed to tear the whole house down, and I needed to build it up one brick at a time. And that was really important to me, and I needed the time. Then I needed to turn the lens inward and figure out, why am I making these mistakes over and over again? And then I needed to rehab, and then I needed to get back, almost like Rocky going to Russia and seeing if I can make this team. And it was interesting because nobody thought I would make the team. One of the local papers, I won't mention which one, had a poll, and less than 4% of the people thought I would actually make the team. Well, that's a good bet. I was 40. I had 2 hip surgeries, 2 knee surgeries. Nobody wanted me around. And, you know, not only did I make the team, but it was the best season that I've had in my career. And those 2 seasons came at 19 and 40. And for me, Carlos, the arc of the best year being as a 19-year-old and as a 40-year-old told me all I needed to know, that I didn't need any crap. What I needed to do was focus, outwork people, and go out and do the best I can, and that was enough.
One last question here, and then we're actually going to have Alex back in just a moment as part of a larger panel where we'll actually dive into his business career a little bit. So I think I saw you. Last question here. So to repeat the question, who has Alex not met that he sees as a real game changer? And do you mean in baseball, or do you mean in life broadly? In life broadly. Who have you not met yet that you'd love to meet, that you think of as a hero, heroine, or game changer?
That I have not. I think you got me there. You know, I admire so many people. What's interesting about the world today, if, you know, 25 years ago, we knew very little about Jeff Bezos, right? We knew very little about Mark Zuckerberg. We knew very little about Kevin Plank. I mean, it is such an amazing world today. We have more opportunity today than ever before. I mean, the average American lives better today than John Rockefeller did, and he was the richest man in the world back then. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, our children, your children, are going to do things that have never been seen and done before. So, you know, back in the day, I would say Jack Welch, I would say Warren Buffett, I would say things like that. But A, I've met them, but B, I want to learn the next young teenager that's got an idea that we're all going to live by. The next, you know, Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever.
Guys, we're going to leave it there. We're going to take a 2-minute break, so don't go anywhere. We're going to reset the stage, and we'll be right back with Alex and a trio of fantastic entrepreneurs. So don't go anywhere. Big hand for Alex Rodriguez.